I went out with him to pick up the mail in the collection boxes so I could attest to the fact that it was picked up. Well, at first I went with them to make sure they mailed these letters, the inspectors, if it developed. And what it was about 8 or 10 Easter seal things with dollars in them, and they had the numbers of the dollars. So I went with them, and they come back, and they said when the particular carrier they were checking comes in, you tell the guy at the top to leave his mail alone. You go rummage through it. I knew the type of mail to look for. He says if it's just one is missing, you come back to the back, blow your nose, and we'll know. We'll take it from there. Oh, he come in, put his mail there. I took care of that. I started looking. Your heart starts pounding. I looked, and pound more. They were all gone. All 6 or 8 of them were gone, not just one. So I went out and blowed my nose. When he come in, then we were using those mailsters. He jumped up and got his jacket and started off, and they confronted him, took him back in, interviewed him. He had 2 or 3 of the dollar bills with the serial numbers in his billfold already. And he claimed he had flushed the envelopes down the commode at home because he didn't want them going to his house to look to see if that was sad.
Yeah.
Guy needed work, been working there since, well, there's no reason for me to say anymore, but I just want to tell you how they do. One other time, they weeded one out. A guy was taking the stamps off the letters for somebody else, and it wasn't for him. They were collectors, and they started complaining about getting their mail with no stamps on them. So they would put them on the train over at Mesa, and they'd still be there, or they wouldn't. You know, they processes. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. We was always, most of the time, privy to a lot of that,
right,
unless they'd make their unannounced deals.
Yeah. Let's just talk a little bit more, and then maybe we can go into a little bit more of your post office story when you come and visit at the museum,
Mm-hmm.
and we can look at your pictures and maybe talk a little bit more in detail.
Yeah.
Just so we can wrap up the interview pretty soon.
Yeah.
So we don't run
I'm a long topper. You know, my wife probably getting hungry.
Yeah.
She's
So you were on Buffalo Street in the 50s, and then when was that post office built on Hewlett?
Well, we're usually in one 10 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
54, 64. So I wasn't there probably more than one on Hewlett, more than one tenure, about 10 years. 87, probably about 1970.
1970. And then when did you retire from post office?
November the 14th, 1980.
And you were always the assistant postmaster?
I was not always. There was the lady postmaster, and her sister was assistant postmaster. It's a little lengthy. She was nice.
What was her name?
Her name was Cooper, Jessie I. Cooper. The assistant postmaster's name was Jones then, but she married a Smallridge. She had always been waiting for a rural route. The old rural carrier retired. She got the rural route because she was of the right party. And the postmasters is political. There was a guy named Turner that wasn't related, that worked at the bank, that got to be postmaster. And I wasn't. I still wasn't. Wait a minute. Oh, that is, because this is before we were down there. But that's how, I'm trying to think now, because we had What was your question back a while ago? I get to ranting and raving. And,
Well, I wanted to ask about, I just said that, that you were basically working for most of that time as assistant
oh,
postmaster.
yeah, but see, I made assistant postmaster after this new postmaster came in.
Okay.
No, I made a superintendent mail, and I'm sorry. That's what I was talking about. I was the next supervisor below this lady, which the new postmaster and this lady got to bickering. And they stuck it out on the streets. The inspectors just come and reduced her down to a clerk. And he couldn't let it go, and they come and finally just checked him out. So there was no postmaster. Then they gave the postmaster to a guy that was a Republican, that was a good lodge member of some kind. I'd known him and his family for years. But he worked for 2 years. He was did paperwork, files and stuff. He had all the desirable things. So he applied to become a postal inspector. You needed 4 years of service. He could count 2 years for his doing it as a notary public or those kind of stuff. And then he's already worked 2 years, so he was accepted as a candidate for postal inspector, sent to Washington. He made it, but you're not allowed to relocate back in the same place. So when he went, I went and saw the committee member of the Republican Party. Explained I was a Democrat, but I knew him for years. He said, I don't know who else should get it. Next thing I know, he was going to be going to the inspectors. And I said, I better go back and see what you're doing. And said, well, they met last night and they decided they couldn't decide on who, they couldn't decide on me. And they all, some of them wanted a lady and they couldn't decide on her, so they just picked the Chamber of Commerce guy to come in. So he was the postmaster until they told him either to get out or retire on disability. You know, I was still there doing my job, understand. I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And
What was his
I
name?
don't say this in animosity. I'd rather not said it.
Okay.
But I want you to know why I wasn't postmaster. And I want to tell you one other thing. When this postmaster went out before the other one, my brother and I flew to L.A. before a board to be considered for postmaster. Here both were doing the work, could do it with no problem. There's one guy in Scottsdale, they sectional senators wanted to get it. He was over there at the same time for the deal. And the one question they asked me, I wished I'd have blowed my top. He says, how can you work with your brother? We've been working for years. And you know, and inspectors in areas in the region and nationwide, when they'd say Chandler, they'd say, oh, that's where the Turner brothers are. And neither one of us could get postmaster because it went from a political thing to a crony thing.
Now, how was a postmaster elected? I just wanted to ask that because you mentioned that the political affiliation mattered. So,
well, you
how
know,
did
your
that work?
postmaster general is elected. Your postmasters aren't elected. They get in with the committee. They're your political committee. There's a Democratic committee and a Republican committee. They have the say. They had the control over the rural routes and the postmasters. They were, until Truman was in, or was Truman a Democrat? He blanketed all the postmasters and the rural carriers in as of that day. It was no more going out if the postmaster changed. You know, it didn't look like he was going to get it, but that's what he did. So from then on, it was by consent of the Senate, but it wasn't political. You know, when you satisfy the people, or they come up through the ranks. I could have got it, but when he asked me, we weren't together, and he asked him probably the same thing. We had served at church together. We'd gone to school together. I wished I'd have come unglued, but you know, I was hoping he would get it. Why would I want to work more than 38 and a half years? Except it would have been an honor to have served 2 or 3 years as postmaster. And but when they brought the guy over, this guy named, that was the postmaster they wanted, some guy named Dunn, I went in and told him, I said I had nothing against him, but I'm retiring as of November the 14th. That's just a few days away. I do my own paperwork. I have nothing against you, but I've got plenty of time in. I don't want to work anymore. And that's it. I gave him back. It was a good pay, and like I say, I was only making 20 cents on the dollar. Why would you do that? Have people come in? I had a guy come in from the base. The lady out there wouldn't give him what she wasn't allowed to give him, and she come in here. He come in here and tell him in. I says, well, she's not allowed. You give me the deal, I'll call her, and they go do this and that. Oh, he hauled off and hit the desk and made a loud noise, and he like he was going to come tear right through me. But you get that every now and then. But anyway, I cherish all the years that I was at, all the people that worked under me. I don't think anyone would ever say anything unkind about me. And they'll tell you I knew my job.
That's good.
I kept us in stamps, did all the personnel work, and all the complaints. Well, I oversaw them later. But even day one, when the person that was our preacher worked at the post office, and he was going into the service, the military. And the lady he was going to marry worked at the post office, lived catty corner across where this is the one down on where we're talking, the first one. Mm-hmm. And when he went into service, I got assigned his slot. She had to come over in the house code to show me how to do the early morning dispatch, which was probably maybe 70, 80 letters to put in a catcher pouch. You know, it's a pouch this long, you strap it around the center. The mail messenger takes it down, puts it up on a thing, the train catches it as it goes through. Wow. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Now sometimes he would throw mail off, or the trains would throw mail off. He'd pull up, he'd start to back up to where the train stopped. He backed off into that rut, and the train just ripped his back wheel off. Uh-oh. We wonder, where in the world is the mail? Finally, he showed up. He got us another thing, fixed it. But there's weird stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I do wanna talk to you more about that because I'm interested in.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
In the future.
All right. I will.
Yes. Let's talk. I want to do a couple ending questions with you, and this is kind of going back to your World War II service. Do you feel like your service in World War II affected the rest of your life?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, first, no, they don't twitch anymore. But I can appreciate things. I'm certainly. I was religious before, and I'm religious, and been more so since then. I've been fair Well, I wasn't unfair. It's something that affects me, and that would, I don't know, I'm usually the same wherever I am. I like to talk. I like to fun. I don't think for several months I could have went out and done hard work being all froze up the way I was, because I got out rated 50% disabled. But it didn't take them long. Within 3 years, they had me down to 20%, which is all right. I was working. But I still had things that were clearing up. You know, you can't be frozen that bad without it being bothersome. But to see how people were treated, as long as you treat them fair, you don't have to explain too much. And they did in basic training. I don't complain about that. We had it hard, except this guy walking on my heels. And Texas, it was nice. There was one time, I'll tell you one other thing. When I was in high school, I was cutting up. The guy was chasing me and I fell right across my ribs. I'm sure I cracked a rib or broke a rib. But I didn't say a thing, didn't tell my folks, didn't tell anybody. I was sitting there trying to get a breath, and the teacher over me saying, rimming me out. I just was just there. But for years, I would have a pain there occasionally, like either a rib broke or moved, or your friends would come up sometime. They thought it was fun to come up, grab you and squeeze you. Oh, I thought I'm in for 2 or 3 weeks of that pain. And we would have tug-of-war deal, only it was with humans. You'd put your arm around one, the arm the other one, and the other there, and then the squads would pull to see. And I thought, oh boy, and I was in the military. I didn't say anything to anybody. They just tough it out. And after all of the service and going through, I was on the train going up to Camp Miles Standish. I had this big old Army overcoat on. We had to put our pack on and had to scoot my arm in it, and I heard something pop, and it was the rib, or whatever it was. And when we got to Camp Miles Standish, was there about 8 or 10 days, I don't know. But it was cold and ice, frozen harder than I'd ever seen it. And we was out doing calisthenics. I was doing push-ups. I was favoring my left hand, but doing mostly with my right hand. And the guy saw it. And he said, hold on a minute. So we're going to have Turner come up here and show us how to do the push-ups. Well, I did. I got through them. But after you do that, you have to ask them to get permission to go on sick call. So I did. I went down there and went through the whole story about it. I didn't blame it on the military. I said that it happened in school, but I was doing the calisthenics and all of that, and I said I just needed to come on sick call. I just figured they'd throw the book at me. But all they did was tape it up. I went overseas with tape on me, which I can understand that. I wouldn't have never went on sick call if he hadn't done that. I'd have toughed it out. But that's the only sour spot that I have with the military. And I never did go a sick leave. And I could have. I wanted to, but I wouldn't have. But I was young. I had it. I could do it. And they never did pay you much. You hardly ever did get pay. It was always back pay. And they had stuff they held out of it. It was only about $30-something a month. One time, what little money I'd have, I'd loan it to somebody because I knew they needed it. I didn't spend that much. And everything works for me. One time I was going out the door, I almost spent my last penny. It wasn't payday yet because they paid you off in cash. And the guy saw me and said, "Turner," said, "don't I owe you some money? Could you figure it?" And I said, "Oh, it's only about $4 or $5. It happens." But I had most of mine. I figured it was a savings if I got it back. But I had a little money when I come home, and plus I had family. The delay en route, furlough going to Texas.
Right.
But
what lessons did you learn from this time in your life?
just to do I always did the best I could. And certainly don't lie. I never did use profanity. My mother and I used it once. My mother happened to hear us and she washed her mouth out with soap. And that was no fun. I was about 3 years old. We was imitating our dad. And that's sad. But she heard us. My brother was good. I wished he was here.
You were close to him.
There's a picture over there. No,